Hello everyone and welcome to Short Story Thursday. Today is Thursday, August the 9th, 2018, and I am out here in Galax, and on a local recommendation, I came by Tasty Freeze to try their Boston style milkshake. This milkshake has got a big scoop of vanilla in the middle of a chocolate milkshake with nuts, whipped cream, and lots of chocolate syrup. So I know this is going to be delicious. Anyway, I thought this picnic table out here would be a nice little relaxing place to record Short Story Thursday, so let me get right into it. Today's story is a true story, and it comes from when I was working at River Street in Savannah, Georgia. So let me just set the scene, if you will. Savannah, Georgia is one of the oldest cities in America, not as old as St. Augustine, of course, but it's way up there, and has been said by Discovery, the ghost hunters on Discovery, to be the most haunted city in all of America, because its history goes back through things like scarlet fever, smallpox, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, witch hunts, and lots of, well, killing Native Americans. So there's a lot of history, a lot of Spanish moss that drapes down and gives a ghostly silhouette look to the city at night. There's also said to be a lot of spirits haunting from slaves that were brought over and brought some voodoo rituals with them. And so for a few generations, there was some of that going on. Not surprising that there has been whole floors in some buildings that people won't even go into because they keep seeing apparitions. Anyway, that is the setting. The place that I was working was River Street, and River Street is as famous as Savannah is. It's really only about 2 miles wide, and River Street is the biggest tourist attraction of the area, and it runs right along in front of the Savannah River, where a bunch of cargo and trading and smugglers and, yes, even slave ships came in for hundreds of years, right there. And even now there are big cargo ships with huge stacks of shipping containers that'll float by every once in a while. But this river is lined with buildings that are hundreds of years old. Some of them, if you go around back, you'll see old hand-hewn doors with hand-tooled blacksmith hinges and rivet nails keeping the hinges in the doors, but then right next to it, retrofitted air conditioners mounted to the walls that are hundreds of years old, with lots of ivy and really hardy ferns growing up through cracks in concrete and walls. The street itself is made with ballast Weightstones, and that is the old days when ships were wind-driven. If they were bringing a ship into port to pick up a cargo and it didn't already have a cargo in it, it needed to weigh itself down so that the wind wouldn't grab that mast and knock the ship over. That was called ballast weight. And it was mostly just big granite, brick-looking blocks that would line the bottom of the ships. And when it was unloaded, instead of just stacking it up in a pile, they made the main street out of it, which makes for a very bumpy ride, but people never drive more than about 5 miles an hour through there anyway because there's so much tourist foot traffic. There are famous restaurants. Paula Deen got her start there. There are famous restaurants and oyster bars, and even a place called Wet Willie's that specialized in alcoholic slushy drinks. And that was right across the street from where I worked. I worked at a little park area, a little wide open park area with plenty of benches, places for people to sit and have define your relationship type conversations with trees shooting up out of islands in the brick sidewalk there. I was a caricature artist, one of 3 that worked that park, and the year I believe was 2014. I was living out of the back of my truck. I did have an apartment, but I'd lost my job for another story that I might get into at some other point, but I needed money. And so I packed everything in the back of my truck, drove down to Savannah, got a street vendor's permit, and I started living out of the back of my truck, and at night I would park behind a church that was attended by some of my family members that lived down there, and so they allowed me to do that. In the mornings, I would go get some breakfast and have a shower at a truck stop. Then I would take a little cart with all of my equipment, and I would wheel it down to the River Street and get to work. In the middle of this little park area on River Street, in between the Echo Chamber and the War Memorial, if you're familiar with the area, there was a sound stage. This was a small sound stage, maybe about 15 feet across, but it did have its own lighting and its own power. So if you wanted to, you could come, you could set up, and you could do a little concert there. It wasn't used very much, but that day a lady came down, and she looked like she was in her 60s, and a very well-spoken lady came down, and she had a letter that she had received from some government officials, city government officials around the area, giving her permission to use the stage and some of the areas around in front of it for the remainder of that evening, from about 5 o'clock until 11. And so she wanted us to clear off from around the sides, which we were obliged to do. We had plenty of other places to work. So I moved over some, set up, and watched the show. Now, what ended up happening that night is something I will remember for the rest of my life. They were using this soundstage, as a ministry and a way to promote their church, try to get some new members. Honorable thing for a church. So they brought out different people to showcase the different ministries. They had somebody from their choir ministry, their music ministry, their youth ministry. Then, as the night wore on, about the time that the sun started going down and people started getting a little red-nosed, to say it in a way, red-nosed, a little flushed, a little unsteady on their feet, a little slurred. About that time, they brought out the Spanish ministry. And the Spanish ministry decided to do their musical set entirely in Spanish. As you might understand, they would, for the Spanish ministry. And so people started making their way down the street, and they would get to the stage and they would hear live music. Now, they didn't understand what they were saying because it was all in Spanish. But they did understand that there was live music there, and it was that lively Spanish type music which meant you want to dance. And so they started dancing. And they were, a little bit too tipsy to realize what they were doing. That there was actually a guy in a black suit holding a Bible, going, "Bless them, Lord. Bless them, Lord." And they were doing their drunken, hip-shaking, worldly dance to the Spanish ministry, trying to promote their Spanish ministry. And after this went on for a few minutes, the Spanish ministry just kind of, I won't say the music just stopped, but it did die out. It's like it faded out. And the people playing their instruments suddenly realized that maybe the idea of doing their songs in Spanish in the middle of a street in Georgia, in America, wasn't really getting the point across like they wanted it to. And, so that's what I saw that day. I saw a Spanish ministry, Christian ministry, trying to promote a church, trying to promote Christianity, and they had drunken people hip-shaking, dancing to their music. And it was, I'm a Christian myself, okay, but I couldn't help but see the humor in the situation. And I will say this, one of the ministers actually came over and grabbed one of the guys around the shoulders and pulled him down in and whispered into his ear. I don't know what it was because I couldn't hear it, but I'm sure it was something like, "I'm sorry, sir, but we're actually a Christian group here trying to promote our church." Because I saw this guy's entire demeanor just shift. And he kind of got rigid, and he actually started crying because he felt bad about what he had just done, disturbing a church service with his drunken dancing, him and his girl. And they started praying with him, and so it actually turned out to be a positive situation in the end. And so there's that work story. So what is the takeaway from this? Well, first off, if you're trying to promote your church or your Christianity outside in America, you probably should do it in English. That's what's one thing, because if you do it all in Spanish, you might attract a few people, but you're really limiting yourself on the people that's going to understand what your message is out in the middle of the sidewalk in Georgia, in the middle of America. There you go, guys. I hope you all enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to smash that like button, leave comments, leave questions, leave suggestions. I love you all very much. And don't forget, I owe you an extra Short Story Thursday. And so get those comments in. And the question of the day is, what is your superpower? You give me a good one, I will include it on the next Short Story Thursday. Love you all very much, and I will see you again in the next video.